Several of us attended the October 11th Fish and Game Commission at San Jose. We didn't get many participants as I was hoping. I guess I didn't do a good job coordinating, and that's all my fault. I was expecting about 50 members to participate, but we only had 30 members participating, which was a little bit disappointing, but I think our member did a great job, and it was very effective for way we present our material, and we are very well organized, and they're very well received by commission members and commission staff and also CDF staff. From us, 5 of us made a speech during the public comment session, as you can see a little bit later, and those were Joe, David, Len, Mark, and Kit. And special thanks to Ernest, Lucky 13, making great looking sign just prior to his European vacation, and also Mark for donating 100 descenders to hand out during the get together, and also hand some of the descenders to commission members and staff. Our petition is not about the recent emergency closure. We started working on this petition since we received the 2023 published rockfish regulation. The new regulation reduced our season significantly. Basically, for kayak angler, we aren't able to go kayak fishing until July 16. There's a 2 months time period where they apply the 50 fathom regulation rule. That's why we want to get exceptions to that regulation. That way we are allowed to fish during that time period too. Also, the second part of our petition is a mandatory use of descender when you are releasing rockfish. Currently, Oregon and Washington State require descenders, and California, I don't know why we don't require it. It's very similar to current requirement of the 18-inch or greater fishing net that we are required to carry for any boat angler. We should have the descender requirement to protect the rockfish whenever we are releasing them, and also protect our resources. I tried to clip the portion that relate to our petition only, and if you watch the last 9 minutes of this video, you will see what is CDFW tentative plan for next year is. Just some of you guys are very interested on that. We still have a long way to go. This is just beginning, and many of us plan to make a presentation during the next Fish and Game Commission meeting at the San Diego, which will be on December 13 and 14. I'll provide the detail later. If you are interested in our participant our survey or website to see the latest information, feel free to visit our site link that's provided in our comment area below. Thank you.
My fellow commissioners will make those changes. Okay, terrific. Thank you all. And that moves us to general public comment. This is an opportunity for anybody in the public to speak on any topic not on today's agenda. So I do want to indicate, I know there's a lot of folks here for an item later in the day that I believe the groundfish. So I want to make sure that you know that the public agenda is for things not on today's agenda. So with that, I'd like to invite anybody who wants to speak on an item not on the agenda to either raise their hand on Zoom, press *9 if you're on the phone, or hopefully turn in a speaker's card. Rachel, do you want to give any other further instructions on that? I think I probably gave them all now.
I think you covered it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So.
I'm sorry, I thought the speakers were lining up in the room.
Okay, we'll have them line up. Come on, just come on and line up and start speaking. Somebody come to, somebody come to the mic. You're the first person, so go for it.
Good morning, members of the commission and members from the DFW. My name is Joseph Huddle. I've been a resident of Northern California for 60 years now, and I've been fishing the area since I was 10. I'm a kayak angler and a member of NCKA as well as fresh and salty kayak fishing. More than any other form of kayak fishing, fishing for inshore rockfish and lingcod can be a real soul-enriching experience. Launching from a quiet cove through small swells surrounded by waves crashing on rocks, dropping a lure or bait down to the unknown, and getting those tugs indicating a mystery fish on the other end of the line is rewarding and magical. That unique encounter is almost always rewarded with a catch to bring home and share as an extension of that experience. So I firmly believe that the complete closure of inshore rockfish as a response to protect the quillback is misguided and based on faulty assumptions. The following 10 points address some of these assumptions and strategies. There are around 90 species of rockfish with a wide range of relative abundance. Some species are naturally more scarce than others. By limiting take of all rockfish and lingcod, quillback are more subject to interspecific competition from similar species, as well as predation from lingcod. Having selective closures, sublimits has worked for recovery of other species. 2, the largest harvest and impact of quillback populations occurred during the 1990s. Take since then has been minor. Closing down the entire rockfish season is not going to magically rebalance the system. 3, since the groundfish emergency of 2000, no-take MPAs have been established, protecting 20 to 30% of quillback habitat. So quillbacks are already protected from extinction. MPAs and their protected populations are not factored into the assessment of populations or conservation strategy. We as a fishermen have already given up access to those areas. 4, after the quillback take was reduced to 0, according to survey data.
Sir, your time's up.
Oh, sorry, I was seated time from.
Oh, you're seating?
Yeah. So
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Melissa, they said they seated their time, Tim. Did we arrange that already?
David has the list of speakers and cards and who has the timer.
Okay, we'll let you go ahead and then we'll come back.
Okay, I'll go through it pretty quick. After the quillback take was reduced to 0, according to survey data, take continued to exceed quotas. I believe this is based on assumed release mortality rather than fish retained. Assumed release mortality is flawed. With the use of fish descenders at depths of less than 150 feet, release mortality is greatly reduced to 30% or less. 5, the greatest quillback densities are at depths between 20 and 40 fathoms. So opening up fishing to 20 or 25 fathoms would have minimal impact on population, especially if descenders are required. 6, MPAs protect 852 square miles of habitat. Kayak fishermen have only about 20 to 25 put-ins along the entire California coast, with a range of only 1.5 to 3 miles at most from those put-ins, which adds up to maybe 100 to 350 square miles, depending on how much of that is habitat and how much is already protected by MPAs. 7, studies in Oregon and Washington have shown the effectiveness of descending devices when used at depths less than 150 feet. California has missed a conservation opportunity by not requiring descenders while fishing for rockfish. 8, the Fish and Game Commission and DFW, they point their fingers at the Pacific Fisheries Management Council as, they have to follow those rules, but the council gets its data from DFW, so it seems the circular finger pointing on that. 9, the closure of inshore rockfish leads to increased fishing pressure on halibut and other species. And 10, the economic fallout to coastal communities is significant. Campgrounds, boat and kayak rentals, launch facilities, local general stores, and restaurants are all affected by the closure. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Could I get your name for the record as well, please?
Joseph Huddle.
Thank you.
Before we have the next speaker, I know what you're saying about this feeling of it being circular, but the reality is that we don't control this decision. It's the PFMC, and that's really where you need to go. And because I think there's sympathy for the. This isn't a discussion. I'm just explaining. Where there's some sympathy for the specific things you're talking about, I think here, but it's not something that we can make a decision on. That there's a specific set of guidelines that we have to adhere to that are set by the PFMC, and we have to live by those. And so we don't have a lot of leeway here. David, do you want to call the speakers? And again, if you ceded your time, please do not.
Good morning, esteemed members of the commission. My name is David Rutpema. I'm an avid kayak fisherman. I'm also an admin of the Fresh and Salty Kayak Fishing Group with over 10,000 members across the world, predominantly in California, up and down the coast. I'm speaking to you today to emphasize the significance of our kayak fishing activities, particularly in context of weather conditions and scheduling constraints. The ability to indulge in ocean kayak fishing, be it with friends or family, holds a special place in my life. Unfortunately, this pursuit is heavily contingent upon favorable weather conditions. As you can appreciate, the unpredictability of the elements often even further limits our abilities to opportunities just on the weekends. Demands of my work and other personal commitments further restrict the time I can allocate to this cherished pastime. What makes ocean kayak fishing so important to me is not just the thrill of the sport, but it also has a profound impact on my well-being. It serves as a vital outlet for me, allowing me to reset, find spiritual healing amidst life's pressures and challenges. Moreover, it plays a crucial role in helping me provide for my family. The fish I catch during these trips contribute significantly to our meals and help reduce our overall expenses. However, I must also bring to your attention the recent closure of rockfishing, a related activity that has further limited our options for sustainable fishing. This closure has had a detrimental impact on our fishing community as it restricts our ability to access diverse fishing opportunities, thereby affecting our livelihoods and the availability of fresh, locally sourced seafood. In light of the above, I kindly urge the Commission to consider the importance of supporting and preserving activities like ocean kayak fishing and finding solutions to mitigate the impact of the closure of rock fishing. By doing so, you will not only enhance the quality of life for enthusiasts like myself, but also contribute to the overall well-being, mental health, and economic stability of our community. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. I look forward to seeing what happens. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thanks for hearing us. My name is Len Gray. I'm a founding member of the Fresh and Salty Kayak Fishing group, and also a member of NCKA and NorCal Salty Kayak Fishing and 3 or 4 other fairly local fishing groups. I might repeat a few things, but I thought I'd go through what I wrote up, keep it scripted so that I don't get upset. First, I'm still taken aback at the response that I got from Ask Wildlife. It's the only response I've gotten. I've sent to 4 different entities that are involved with this closure of nearshore rockfish ground fishing, stating that it certainly is equitable. We can still fish from jetties, shoreline, and piers. If any of you are fisher persons, anglers, you'll know that that's absolutely not accurate. You can hardly catch anything from jetties and piers other than eel and bait fish sometimes, and very small fish. There's nurseries there and all that. So I also want to point out, as illustrated by the last 2 to 3 years of drastic measures taken mid-season of several different species, anglers that I've spoken to, and I speak to hundreds a year at least, are really losing faith in any data sets that are being used and referenced in any of these decisions. Mr. Schuyler, I heard you say something to my colleague over there, Joe, that it doesn't come on you. We have to talk to other entities. Everything I've read about this, we've got NOAA giving input. We've got 3 or 4 different sources giving input and reading these statistical reports. A lot of this stuff isn't lining up. Regarding quillback, historically, it would make sense to reduce the keep to 0. At such time, we could go back to catching some and
Time's
keeping
up. Thank
some.
you, sir.
That was my first 2 minutes.
Your time's up. Sorry.
But I have time allotted.
We got that's to be arranged ahead of time. David, has that been
I
arranged?
did. We filled in cards. There was 5 speakers. We have 10 people here.
5 speakers. Okay, go ahead. We'll give you another minute.
Thank you. Reducing takes does work. Yellow eye has been limited to 0 since I've been kayak fishing in the ocean. And every time I go, I catch massive yellow eye. And I pull out my descender that was given to me for free from an organization in Oregon, because they don't even require it here. And I descend them down with 1 to 1.5 pounds of weight. And I'm pretty certain most of them live, because I'm fishing in 130 feet max of water. This closure is a direct conflict with the California Green Initiative. All these kayak fishermen are moving to going on boats, diesel motors, smogging up, creating greenhouse gas like you can't believe. And the last point is, if you could just give us something to catch, take a look at it. There's 90 species of rockfish. There's some that are so abundant you can't even get your lure down to the ones you're targeting without getting hooked up. Blacks, blues, coppers, there's so many. If you can just go back to the think tank there and come up with something that'll give us something to fish for and enjoy our sport.
Thank you.
And catch natural resources that we all pay for dearly living in California to feed our families, relatives, friends, and be appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had seated time also.
Okay, you're the final speaker, correct? One more.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Mark Lockaby, and I'm one of the co-authors of the petition before you today. First and foremost, no one cares about the health of the fisheries than those of us that use this beloved natural resource. Personally, I've been fishing in the San Francisco Bay Area since the early 1960s, primarily from shore and charter boats. About 6 years ago, I bought a fishing kayak and have been having a great time targeting many different species in the lakes, bays, and ocean. When I and the kayaking community heard of the upcoming proposed 2023 rockfish regulations, many of us were very upset, and those with power boats would be able to fish a much longer season than we were allowed. We felt that it was unfair that we were being signaled out to solve this problem. We, like others, are not happy about the salmon and abalone closures, the halibut take reduction, but it applies to all of us as a whole and doesn't target one group for a solution. One of my fellow members of the social media site, Northern California Kayak Anglers, Paul Chang, was particularly upset. He and his wife primarily target rockfish from a tandem kayak and often writes and shares videos about their wonderful adventures. He wrote letters to Fish and Wildlife addressing his concerns about the nearshore closure. He and others who have written in have received the exact same response, telling them to fish from shore, jetties, and piers. Sorry, but this just isn't the same as being out in the water in a kayak. For me and others, kayak fishing is a major stress reducer. Being out on the water in a kayak must be experienced to understand. Faced with inequity, Paul solicited on NCKA website to put together a working group to write a petition to open nearshore rock fishing to human-powered watercraft. I and several others agreed to join Paul in writing the petition before you today. None of us in the group has ever done something like this before. We met bi-weekly for several months to work on it. We discussed comments from various social media fishing sites to come up with the parameters for the petition. There were a lot of differing opinions and feel that we represented the majority. When I fish for salmon and halibut, I find it much more challenging, and like others, I often end up with rockfish bycatch. And if not, after 5 or 6 hours, I switch to targeting rockfish and have always caught a few to take home. Rockfish are extremely abundant near shore and I've always come home with a few, no matter what species I have been targeting. I am getting up there in age, and kayak fishing requires a lot of demanding physical activity. I would hate to see my final years having the ability to rockfish from a kayak closed. In closing, we appreciate the staff support and your attention to this matter. We firmly advocate for a no-take approach with mandatory descender use as the equitable solution. This preserves our traditions and protects threatened species. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, my name is Keith Nguyen. I have some I want to pass out because there's some photos in it. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Keith Nguyen. I'm also known as Los Anchovy on the internet. I'm a vlogger, a blogger, a writer, a YouTuber, tournament director, fishing team manager, and above all, the guy who just loves to fish on a kayak. In my professional life, I've served as an elected official. I've sat on the board of directors of multiple nonprofits and president and as a board member. I've worked as a policy advisor for the city of San Jose, and I've agendized, reviewed, and drafted multiple policy memorandums like the ones you see today. So government is not new to me. I've served in public policy for many years because I believe the functioning and thriving of democracy depends on an active and engaged citizenry. I am engaged because it is my duty as a citizen of this country, because our republic demands it. Our democracy cannot function otherwise. Today, I speak as a kayak fisherman and as a private citizen to voice my concerns about the policies that have been enacted by the Commission and its direct impact on businesses and lives that depend on healthy fishery to survive and serve the customers and the public. These are our friends, our neighbors, and the backbone of our economy. I'll tell you 3 short stories of real people and the direct impact that these closures have had on their lives. Short. No faceless statistics or data points, just real stories, real people, and real lives. There's a lady who owns a tackle shop store only a few miles from here. She's been running her small businesses for a long time and always been supportive of my efforts in the kayak fishing community. For many years, she's run a small and successful business. She paid her taxes, she looked at all her customers, and by means, we would consider her an ideal American. This closure has been especially difficult for her business. She told me there's less customers coming in, expenses continue to rise, and inflation is taking a toll on her bottom line. I told her I was attending the October 11th CDFW Commission meeting, and the Commission has agendized the white sturgeon, and there could be 3 possible outcomes. 1, no changes to the current policy. 2, restrictions on the white sturgeon fishery, and a complete closure of the fishery being number 3. I've known her for a long time, and I know that what she says and what she doesn't say, and she does not need to say a word because the look in her eyes said it all. How was I gonna make it through this? I don't have an answer. Some of my friends are businesses and kayak fishing guides. They do this either as a full-time job or as a side hustle. They do so because they are passionate about the sport and they have decided to make it as their livelihood. This is what we say in America, right? Follow our passions. That's what we say. They find great happiness and fulfillment in putting their clients on the fish, not so much fish, but rather the experiences that their clients get from fishing. As a guide, they pay their yearly licenses, insurance costs, upkeep, capital expenditures. They hope to recoup some of it through their fees and even turn a profit at the end of the year. Many of them have been forced to close their small businesses while others are trying to sustain it through these closures. How are they going to make it? I don't have a good answer. Okay. The fishing community is a tight-knit group. We have our differences and squabble among each other many times. During our events, we catch up with each other's lives. Weddings, graduations, birthdays, and new additions. Kayak fishing is just a means for us to get together and hang out as a group. It's so important that you guys can understand past COVID. As a tournament director myself, I know the difficulties of organizing such events. Uncertainties such as emergency closures are devastating. After months of organizing, sending out our invitations, making safety plans, and courting sponsorships, having an emergency closure is devastating to organizers and the businesses that support them. Our tournament supports local coastal cleanup projects, salmon projects, and various nonprofits that serve our communities. I have some slides there you guys can see that these tournaments give money to these organizations that then clean up our coastal side. These emergency closures impact our tournaments, our businesses, and the organization that depends on the donations to serve the needy. How can we plan events if policies are dropped suddenly, erratically, and with little notice? How can we make it? I don't have a good answer. I have been where you have been, commissioners. I have been forced to make difficult decisions before hundreds of my constituents, if not thousands in some cases. I've been provided with staff recommendation, and as staff, I have provided those recommendations. But as a policymaker, I've always thoughtful about the direct impacts of my decision on our parties. It was my job, it was my duty to do so. The kayak fishing community has provided the Commission with an alternative and solution moving forward. We are here to be part of the solution, not just complain or add to the problem. All of us want to see a healthy and sustainable fishery while protecting the sport that has brought us so much joy, mentally, physically, and even spiritually, as some have put it. How can we make it? We have a good answer, and we hope you listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers in the room? Seeing none, Sherry, we go. How many speakers do we have online?
Phone caller 287, go ahead, please. Okay, while our phone caller's getting situated, Adam Helm is our next speaker. Go ahead, please, Adam Helm.
Hi, I'm Adam Helm. I'm the general manager of Monterey Bay Kayaks. I'm also the rec fishing primary for the National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. And I also run a nonprofit that gets kids, people with disabilities, and veterans out kayak fishing. I fully support and endorse everything that's already been said. So to avoid repetition, I'm going to just talk about some other points. One thing we talk about a lot is data, especially with the recent closures. So if we're going by data standards, being someone that works near the docks almost every single day, I have never in my life seen so many cow cod being taken. So now we have another endangered fish species that's being taken in substantial numbers. If you look at the data of the amount of people that have been ticketed over the past few months, fishing in deeper waters, taking cow cod, also the amount of what we call floaters in the industry of people not using descenders out in deeper waters, we're seeing yellow eye, vermilion, cow cod, and multiple other fish species now being endangered due to the opening of deeper depths of fishing. In an industry that's already been really hurt, the outdoor industry has been struggling this year, coming back from COVID. And as a guide myself, I've spent a lot of money trying to become a guide and have maintained that, and it has hurt businesses all along and up and down the coast for guided fishing, as we are no longer allowed to do this. So we had to cancel many tours that took kids and families out kayak fishing, which has also impacted our finances within the business. I just wanted to say that the management needs to be more open to discussion instead of just looking at data, and this data net, all of the data needs to be shared with the public instead of a select few. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Phone call.
Participants in public comment today, specifically those who've traveled a long distance to be here in San Jose, you illustrate the value of civil discourse and civic engagement. So thank you for doing that. Your passion for your interest in fishing comes through clearly and loud. And we're, super aware at the department of the frustration you have and many have in Northern California. Tomorrow, I actually think it's an agenda item 27B where Dr. Schumann will provide further update on the rockfish. But since you're here, there are a couple of things I wanted to share with you. I think in the northern part of the state, this is a fishery that was going to close anyway mid-October. And what we have going on is a dynamic about just this calendar year of 2023. And the fishery vastly, significantly exceeded the federal harvest limits for 2023. Like it says you can harvest this much, and we collectively went way through it. The decision happened in the federal venue that you've heard mentioned, the Fishery Council. And since then, we've also had the National Marine Fisheries Service promulgate federal regulations to affect this closure. So I would just acknowledge for you, 2023 is impactful, but maybe what really is our most prudent approach is to think about 2024 and try to be ahead of 2024 in a way that reflects what we've learned and some of your feedback. So this is not a guarantee, but I will share with you at the department level, we think there might be a way to have this conversation at our commission, end up with some results that we can better control before we go into the exclusive federal venue and have some of this really hardened for 2024. So some of the things we're thinking about, and again, not a guarantee, and I know you're recording me, so I'm gonna, when you send the date stamp referring to the video later, I'm gonna point everyone back to me saying it's not a guarantee. Yeah, but some of the ideas we're deliberating on internally, reflecting about this experience, could include these things. There might be a way to actually have a prohibition on the retention of quillback. That's something I heard you talking about. there could be a way to think about authorizing nearshore fishing, figure out like 20 fathoms, 50 fathoms, figure out something that allows for distinguishing in a method of harvest. It's possible that we can think about, requiring descenders on board. So there are things that we're already exploring that we would want to bring into the discussion about 2024. I think we may have missed the moment on 23, driven by the fact there's room for improvement on science, but the data shows we blew through as a broad community the limitation for 2023 on harvest. So that's where we're at, and I wanted to share it with you since you came in person. So let's stay close and let's facilitate how to keep having the conversation and see what we can do better by the time we get to next year.
Great, thank you. Yes, please, Vice President Zavaleta.
Yeah, thanks so much for those comments. Really appreciate everyone coming out in person. And I actually want to ask a question of Director Bonham. I really appreciate the options you just laid out as possibilities, and want to ask whether there is any kind of advisory group or advisory process to involve the kayak anglers directly with the department in these conversations before the department goes to the PFMC, so that it can incorporate their ideas.
I think quickly my answer would be probably. Here's what I mean. There actually are like formal advisory groups with identified members in the Pacific Fishery Management Council venue. And I don't think that they are kind of members expressly representing the kayaking interest. I see Dr. Schumann on the screen, but it's also possible the department in its own accord can have kind of an organic communication relationship set up with this sector. Craig, over to you.
Thanks, Chuck. Good morning. Craig Schumann, Marine Management Manager, Department of Fish and Wildlife. So Chuck, Director Bonham referenced the advisory groups through the council. So that is the formal venue where we receive input from the different stakeholder groups, the different user groups, the different sectors. We're also happy to have offline discussions with specific sectors, but again, we try to funnel all of that through the process that's been established through the council to incorporate the comments and the input. And then it's really finding that balance from all of the different user groups in the sectors, because we're all sharing that resource.
Please.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I also just want to thank you all for being here. It matters a lot. We do care about fishing. Part of our job is to ensure that people in California are able to fish, and I know it's important to me personally. So really appreciate you coming today. The data are what they are. You've heard it a few times. My understanding is that when this nearshore closure was announced, north of the 4010, we were at 150% of the overfishing limit, and south of the 4010, we were at 111% of the overfishing limit. So, and I think NMFS might actually be in the process of formally declaring the California stock of quillback overfished and developing a rebuilding plan. I think that's right too. That said, as some of you have mentioned, yelloweye are still not rebuilt, have been overfished, declared overfished for many, many years, and still there is fishing for other species. So we know that it can be done. I love hearing some of the ideas that Director Bonham laid out. We are trying to avoid closing for 20 years by doing something now. So maybe there's a different fathom line that we can talk about for 2024. Maybe there's something about descenders. I did want to ask a question. I don't know if it's for Craig or for Director Bonham, but I see that the department has lots of encouragement around using descending devices, and it's a best practice, but it's not required. Why is that different in California versus in other parts of the West Coast?
Craig, that sounds like a great question for you.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So I think that the first step is to carry descenders, and that is easily enforced to make sure someone has that device on board their vessel that meets specific requirements or is able to return fish to depth. And again, I don't want to speak for enforcement, but it's a lot harder to enforce the use of descending devices. And so we're in active discussions with the fleet, with enforcement. I think a good first step is to require that everyone carries them, and strongly encourage their use. And we know that the vast majority of our anglers are conservation minded. So if they have them on board, they're going to use them. That small proportion that is not, even if we require them to use them, they probably won't when they get into the heat of a big hot bite. And so that's one of the challenges that we see.
Great, thanks, Craig.
Great, thank you. And I want to reiterate what Director Bonham and Commissioners Murray have said, that we really appreciate your being here. We really appreciate you as a sailor and a kayaker. I super appreciate non-motorized vehicles, and I appreciate the challenges that presents. You know, this is the rockfish recovery has been a real success story, and yet nothing's perfect, right? And we have some species that still need more work and are at risk, and I know we all want to protect those species and keep this fishery broadly, with all the different species of rockfish, around for generations to come. And I think we can do that working together. I really appreciate Director Bonham's description of how we can work together from here, given that we don't have full control over this issue, and how we can maybe get ahead of 24. And so I really encourage that. I appreciate Chuck's and the directors and Dr. Schuman's comments about working with you both formally and informally to make sure that we're really ahead of the game for next year and looking at solutions. So again, really appreciate it, and we are here to work with you to the extent that our hands aren't tied. With that, I think we're done with public comment, unless there's any other comments from fellow commissioners. Okay, so we're moving on to items 3, 4, and 5, the consent items.
Good afternoon, President Sklar, members of the commission. A few updates for you and then some follow-ups from previous discussions. So the first is the update on the lobster domoic acid issue that we've had. On September 22nd, the director of the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA, in consultation with the state public health officer at the California Department of Public Health, determined that lobster in areas of Los Angeles and Orange counties contained unhealthy levels of domoic acid, and recommended delaying the opening of commercial and recreational spiny lobster fisheries in affected areas. Following this recommendation, Director Bonham enacted a delay to the start of the recreational and commercial spiny lobster fisheries within specific areas of Los Angeles and Orange counties. In some areas immediately surrounding the recreational delay area were opened under a recreational advisory issued by the California Department of Public Health to avoid consuming the viscera or roe of spiny lobster. Commercial season delays areas include all state waters off of Palos Verdes in LA County down to the Huntington Beach area in Orange County. The recreational season delay includes state waters between the Point Vicente State Marine Conservation Area and the westernmost point of the Long Beach Breakwater. And as I mentioned, a health advisory was issued for areas adjacent to those delay areas. 2 samples taken at least 7 days apart with results below 20 parts per million are typically required to rescind the delay or to open an area that's closed. Weekly sampling of lobster has been ongoing, and literally within the last 2 minutes, I received word that we have clean samples, and we've received a memo from OEHA so we can get moving to try to get those areas open again. So that's what I was just multitasking on when you called my name. So that's very good news. So what did we do in terms of outreach and communication? We issued a press release announcing the delays on September 22nd with links to maps. We put out a Marine Management News blog on September 28th before the sport opener with a reminder of the season delays. We printed signs and posted those at various access points in the sport delay area, and big shout out to our outreach team for developing those signs and getting those posted. And now at some point in the near term, we're gonna have to go get those signs down. We sent email notification to all commercial lobster permit holders who operate in the affected area, to all CPFE and dive charters in the Los Angeles and Long Beach area, and all lobster report card holders that have an email address on file. When the season delay is rescinded, and again, hopefully that will be very soon, we will issue a press release and a marine management news blog that'll go out on social media. We'll notify all report card holders, and we'll send an email to all commercial lobster fishers in the area, and of course, go get those signs down. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on domoic acid before I move on to groundfish. Great, groundfish it is. So we discussed some of this yesterday, so a bit of this will be repetitive, but I know we've got some folks that tuned in specifically because it was on the agenda, so I'll provide a little bit of extra detail. As you recall, during our August update, we provided a series. We reviewed the series of in-season actions taken by the department to limit continued mortality of quillback rockfish. Specifically, these actions included the prohibition of quillback rockfish retention statewide in sport and commercial fisheries, and that was effective August 7th. We then restricted fishing depths for recreational groundfish fisheries to waters deeper than 50 fathoms, effective August 21st for the northern groundfish management area. And we followed that same action for the other groundfish management areas effective September 1st. So that was for Mendocino, San Francisco, and the central groundfish management areas. These actions were necessary because we have substantially exceeded the federal quillback harvest limits for 2023 in our California fisheries. We recognize and appreciate the frustration and disappointment, the economic impacts that these unplanned series of actions brings. We did not take these decisions lightly, and this is especially in light of the ongoing salmon closure that has tremendously impacted our coastal communities. Since that time, we have been in the process of planning groundfish on several fronts. So first, NIFS published in-season regulations mirroring the state's closures effective August 2nd. The rule also included closure of the nearshore commercial fisheries and reductions in trip limits for shelf species for the remainder of 2023. And these regulations were recommended by the Pacific Fishery Management Council at its September meeting. Also at the September PFMC meeting, in a number of public comments to the department, recreational representatives stressed the need to be able to fish for and retain rockfish and lingcod deeper than 50 fathoms on the same trip where they fish for Dungeness crab or lobster via hoop nets or pots. Because of the change to move groundfish fishery offshore, other regulatory changes were needed to authorize these nearshore activities for lobsters and crabs. So in response to these comments, the department will file an emergency regulatory action with the Office of Administrative Law early next week that will allow the use of Dungeness crab traps, hoop nets, and bait nets as otherwise provided by law while authorized species of groundfish are on board. The public notice was released a couple of days ago, and the 5-day comment period we're in, I believe it's on Monday or Tuesday, in which we'll be able to file that with OAL. As Director Bonham pointed out yesterday, we're now in the planning phase for 2024 sport and commercial fisheries, working both in the council arena and with stakeholders to ensure there is consistency with state and federal regulations in 2024. The actions planned will require a number of rule changes to both state and federal regulations. So as you recall, groundfish are on a 2-year cycle. So when we enter 2024, we will be on the same regulatory structure that we had when we went into 2023. And we know that structure didn't work for us. So we're going to have to go in and change that. And that will likely be through an emergency action that will be brought to the commission for your consideration in February of 2024 to make sure we stay under those federal guidelines. So some of the things we're thinking about, and again, I'll add the caveats that Director Bonham pointed out yesterday that nothing is certain yet, but these are some of the items that are on the table. One is continued prohibition of retention of quillback rockfish. We are working to establish a series of 20 fathom waypoints that would be used to inform an inshore boundary line. Those waypoints don't currently exist. Typically, those waypoints are established at the federal level. But because the 20 fathom contour is largely, if not all, in state waters, we need to do that on our end. And we've redirected some of our GIS staff to start working on that post haste so we get those waypoints established and vetted. We'll be looking to establish some numbers of months where fishing is authorized inshore 20 fathoms, followed by months that are open deeper than 50 fathoms. And whether those months are going to alternate or be consistent with each other, to be determined, and that will be the discussion we'll have with stakeholders based on when they want to fish where, with the goal of avoiding quillback rockfish to the maximum extent possible. We're looking to require a descending device to be on board when targeting groundfish. And then just a heads up, we're also looking at a reduction in the sub-bag limit for vermilion rockfish statewide, as the harvest of this species has also exceeded its statewide limit, and deeper water opportunities are increasing impact. So as we're moving people offshore, we're now impacting other species. So we've got this whack-a-mole problem. Question yesterday about how members of the public can participate in the season setting process. Primarily, the best way to do that is through the California representatives on the Pacific Fishery Management Council's Groundfish Advisory Panel, otherwise known as the GAP. There are 4 California recreational representatives on the GAP, including 2 at-large positions. The membership roster, including contact information for the GAP representatives, is available on the council's website at pcouncil.org. And anglers can also provide public comment directly to the Pacific Fishery Management Council through the public comment portal on the PFMC website. The PMC will be meeting November 1st through 8th in Garden Grove, and they will be discussing these issues there.